This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
Be advised that the views and opinions of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
Pero may mga nagsasabi na ang problema ay nanggagaling mismo sa Supreme Court.
Ano sa palagay nyo ang endgame na gustong mangyari nung grupo ng Maute?
Napakadaming problema ng bayan. Magandang gabi po sa ating mga kasambahay. Muli pong samasa inyo ang inyong kaibigan si Kit Tatad, kasama po si Ariel Ayala sa ating programa, Una sa Lahat. Kasama din po natin ngayong gabi ang isang kaibigan, si Charlie Avila, isa pong church historian, kaibigan po ng mga magsasaka sa Niugan. At may karanasan po sa politika. Pag-uusapan natin ngayong gabi ang pagpatay at pag-armas ng kaparian. Sa loob po ng 2 taong nakararaan, libo-libo po ang napapatay ng mga drug suspects. Di umano. Kasalanan, nasa droga, mga ito. Whether talagang in the act or hindi, at least nasa droga. Pero sa loob po ng nakaraang 6 na buwan, 3 pari po ang napaslang. Anong kasalanan? Hindi po natin nalalaman. Ito po ay pinanggalingan ng malaking himutok ng ating simbahan. Nagsalita po ang mga kinaukulan po sa Catholic Bishops Conference of the Philippines. Ang presidente, si Archbishop Romulo Valles ng Davao, nagsalita. Nagsalita po ay yung vice-presidente ng CBCP, na obispo po ng Caloocan, si Ambo David. Nagsalita po si dating presidente ng CBCP, si Archbishop Sok Villegas ng Lingayen, Dagupan. Nagsalita po si Bishop Bailon ng Legazpi. Marami pong nagsalita, mga opisyal po ng ating simbahan, mga kaparian. At nung Biyernes po ng hapon, mayroong ilan? Mahigit po 150 kaparian ang nagmarcha po mula po dun sa Green Hills, Lasal, patungong EDSA Shrine at nag-alok po ng isang misa at ng, anong tawag nila? Reparations. Dahil po sa mga napaslang. Pero marami pong pare ang nag-apply po ng gun permits. No? Hindi lang kaparian. Mga protestanteng pastor, sumali na po dito. Proteksyon po nila. Kinalungkot po ito ng mga obispo sapagkat yung pong vocation ng pagpare ay inaalok mo pa ang salidyan. Hindi ka natatakot na mamatay, maaari ka maging martir, kaya yung pag-armas po ay hindi pinag-uusapan. Pero ito, marami po ang nag-apply na magkaroon ng baril. At hindi natin alam kung sila ay pinagbawalan ng kanilang mga superior o ano. So, ngayon, nandito po si Charlie Avila para po tulungan tayong himayin ano bang nangyayari sa ating simbahan. Saan ba patungo ito, Charlie? Una, yung pagpatay. Pangalawa, yung pag-armas. Saan tayo patungo bilang isang bansang Katoliko?
Una sa lahat, pag may mga pangyayari na ganyan sa simbahan, sa ating kasaysayan, it is usually because priests have come to a point of effectively identifying themselves with the poor, with the oppressed, with the deprived, with the people who are suffering injustice. And pag ganun po, like what you mentioned, that these days, so many people, the poorest among the poor, binabaliwala. Basta namamatay na lang. Rule of law does not seem to exist, except maybe selectively for those who have a standing in society. Libo-libo. Nasaan ang boses nila? Karaniwan po, when that happens, you find only among the churches people who are brave enough and who are self-obliged to speak for those who have no voice. And they make themselves vulnerable when they do so. Why? Because that is not supposed to happen. These people were supposed to die without anybody complaining. These people were supposed to die with people clapping. And here comes some priests who will say, that is immoral, that cannot happen, that should not happen. Well, they are making themselves vulnerable to the same bullets that hit many others before them. That is their job, that is their vocation. Now, if suddenly some of them say, at this time, it is also probably a point where we should think twice. Maybe we should also buy a few guns from the gun store and get some permit. Well, it's another matter for them to discuss. That is really consistent with the calling that they responded to.
Okay. Charlie, dumaan tayo ng martial law. Marami din sigurong napaslang doon in the course of the armed struggle, no?
Yes.
Oh. Pero wala tayong nabalita na may mga paring pinatay ng walang kadahi-dahilan, no? Or am I wrong?
Mayroon din.
Meron din.
May mga ilan because dito sa isang kilusan I was identified with, kilusan ng mga malayang magsasaka, magbubukid. May mga chaplains kami na napatay na halos kung titingnan natin, halos walang dahilan except of their identification with the poor at that time and in different provinces. That is true. That was not justified. That was always immediately condemned as something that was exceptional. But that happened. That happened.
Pero may condemnation.
There was
Official.
yes.
Galing sa pamahalaan.
Yes.
Sa atin po bang kasaysayan, lalo na simbahan Katoliko, yan bang pagpatay sa mga itinuturing na leader, yan ba'y nakakapagpahina sa pananampalataya at kilusang Katoliko o nagpapalakas?
Palagay ko nakakapagpalakas because hindi lang sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, sa kasaysayan ng mundo. Pag dumanak ang dugo, fertilizer numero 1 yan sa pagpalago ng karamihang mga gusto mag-alay ng kanilang buhay.
Ito ho ba yan, as a church historian, ito ba talaga yung, can we say, culture ng Katoliko? Kasi sabi nga nila, ang Katoliko, paano ba natatag yan? Yan ay sa katas ng dugo ng mga founding fathers ng Catholicism. Pag itinayo ni Panginoong Jesucristo, dugo ang ganyan ginamit.
Ganun nga eh. Ilang daang taon yun, ganun.
Libo.
Hanggat sa they took it for granted. There will always be martyrs. There will be more confessors, those who confess the faith, those who bear witness. But if bearing witness will mean their lives being taken away from them, they went to the amphitheater, they went to the Colosseum, and they faced the music, so to speak.
Ignatius of Antioch. No?
Yes, starting.
Pero sa ating kasaysayan, Charlie, dumating sa punto na nagkaroon ng organized resistance, no?
Yes.
Galing sa mga Kristiyano.
Opo.
Ano bang tawag doon? Christian
Madaming organizations.
National
We are
Liberation.
referring to a Christians for National Liberation
Yeah.
at one point in our
Yeah.
history, going back to the 1960s. But before that, even I know from the 1930s, there were already priests who belonged to the Jesuit order, for example, who identified themselves with the struggle for social justice, even during the time in Quezon. Then in the early 50s, you had missionaries here like Father Hector Maury, you have Father Hogan. They identified with the organizing of the peasantry and of the workers. And then much later in the 60s, the Divine Word missionaries, they're in Tagaytay, in Christ the King, they went massive, all out. Principally because they are missionaries, but not only missionaries to foreign lands, also to different provinces in our country. And there came a time that pagdating ng panahon ng martial law, most of their chaplains, they got together, they banded together and called themselves the Christians for National Liberation, CNL. And mainly priests, but many nuns, and many lay people also.
May nag-armas ba doon?
Ganito. Kasi sa umpisa, the inspiration was Christian social teaching. The struggle for land justice was big. No? The struggle for unionism was very strong. And then when the different partisan groups came about, like the Communist Party of the Philippines, Mao Zedong thought, and the National Democratic Front, was very attractive as a program. Then many of the priests, especially when liberal democracy was gone, had nowhere else to go but to embrace that program. Now, embracing that program did not mean that they themselves would take up arms. No. But there was, I know from memory, from history, that so much discussion going on at the time. Violence, non-violence, what is the justification for the use of violence. But always the given was, let us start with the major predicate, and that is the institutionalized violence against the poor and the oppressed.
Okay.
No?
Babalikan po natin, Charlie. Pagkaroon ng ilang sandali.